We are born, in His name we live, and in His name we die. Here and there, our souls prostrate to their Creator with humbleness and piety, and creatures do zikr all the time. Here and there, la 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 la, la la.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome dear viewers joining us on our live program Here and There, our Ramadan special for 2017. And as our title suggests, Here and There, we have fundamental aims with this program. Number one is drawing ourselves closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, building and connecting or reconnecting that link with our Lord, with our Creator. The second aim that comes from our title, There, we are looking at different cultures, different customs, different traditions, tying our knots with our fellow brothers and sisters from around the world. And we have a very special guest, and we have a very special country as well that we're going to be talking about today in our program. Before I mention the name of that country, I want to just remind ourselves that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, that verily all of the brothers, all those who believe, they are from one family. They are brothers and sisters united with the same aim, and that is the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we look in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, we find that there are people inside the community of the Prophet ﷺ that were from different backgrounds. We have, for example, Bilal, who was from Abyssinia. We have Suhaib al-Rumi, who was from Rum. And we have Salman al-Farsi, who was from Fars. And they different backgrounds, but yet they came together and they played a fundamental role in establishing Islam. Bilal, for example, was a slave. And then when he embraced Islam, he didn't just become a normal person, he actually became from amongst the elite of the Muslims. He was the first person to call the adhan. What about Salman al-Farsi? He came from Persia. His role was so important that in the Battle of the Trench, it was his idea that saved and protected the Muslims from the enemies who were attacking them. So we can see how Islam welcomes people from different backgrounds, and we want to, inshallah ta'ala, look at different countries. We've explored America, we've had a look at Nigeria, and today, inshallah, we're going to look at Indonesia and see how we can connect our ties with our brothers and sisters in Indonesia. So let us go around the table, see who we have in the studio, and then get into our discussion. And one thing before we do that as well is the phone lines. They are open, so do join us with your questions, and also Skype as well, which is Huda_TV. Yesterday we had some very interesting questions on very different subjects, so do join us today as well with your questions, and inshallah ta'ala we'll try our best to answer those as well. If I can turn to my right, Brother Omar, I'd like to welcome you to the program, brother. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Brother Junaid. And I also want to say that it's really important to have this concept of lita'arafu, to know each other, because this actually breaks a lot of stereotypes. And especially like when we are familiar with the media in the West in general, that they have stereotypes about like maybe some of the Muslim cultures and so on and so forth. So we want to clarify the differences between the culture and the religion, because sometimes we fall into this problem of mixing both of them.
Okay.
Right? And sometimes we think that is part of religion. And sometimes, like as Brother Ali said to us, like one of the episodes, that you know, some people, they think that Muslims are mostly Arabs, and Indonesia is the biggest, you know, country in terms of population in the Muslim world, and they are not Arabs. So this breaks one of the stereotypes, and I'm looking forward to interesting points, inshallah, to talk about like the habits in Ramadan and habits and the history of Indonesia, inshallah. But before this, we'd like also to introduce our co-presenter, Brother Ali. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you, Brother Omar and Junaid. And dear viewer, thank you also for continuing to be with us from day to day, looking at joining us to participate. And we have gotten lots of participation in this show here and there. Tonight, as the brothers have said, we're looking at the country of Indonesia and how Islam is a practice and Ramadan is observed. Very interesting country, as Brother Omar said, the most populous Muslim country in the world, 230 million plus people, and that makes it you know, very important for us to talk about, and it's a great balance for Nigeria, also one of the top Muslim majority countries in the Muslim world. And one of the things I look forward to in tonight's discussion is about this great Ming Dynasty admiral, Jing He. And some historians believe that he's responsible for Islam being spread across Southeast Asia and into the Asia Pacific.
Okay.
That would, of course, include Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, so on and so forth. So we look forward to a great discussion. Please, let me introduce our guest for this evening. This brother, as we're saying, is coming from Indonesia. He has a very interesting background. He has also spent some time in the United States. We're referring to Brother Ahmed Honest Kashidi. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Here and There.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, Brother Ali. It's a pleasure to be here. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Can we start with, as I said, a very important question about the arrival of Islam. I was just speaking about it briefly, the arrival of Islam and the establishment of Islam in Indonesia.
So Indonesia, as we've heard from the brothers right here, of how it's the most populous Muslim majority country in the world per se. That's a hidden gem. People don't know that. People think of, when people even think of Indonesia, in a sense, they don't even know what Indonesia is. You hear of Australia, you hear of Thailand, those excursions where people go for vacations and whatnot, but that archipelago that you see in between, it's like the unknown usually. It's not even drawn on globes and whatnot when you spin them around. It's like just cluttered islands. And it's also the biggest archipelago as well, spanning about 70,000 islands per se.
Wow.
And with that comes with the diversity of Indonesia. And as to touch on the spreading of Islam in Indonesia per se, Brother Ali stated about how the Ming, which dynasty?
The Ming.
The Ming dynasty,
yes.
of how it spread.
One of the most successful in Chinese history. Very productive, very efficient government. They were in power for nearly 3 centuries. And during this time, they had major reconstruction projects, great expansion works, and a very important part of it was this admiral who was a Muslim, a Chinese Muslim, who made connections. He made the Hajj pilgrimage, of course, but made connections with the mainland of Africa on the East Coast and potentially South Africa as well. Yeah, the Ming dynasty was...
So, yeah. With the Ming dynasty into play, through my readings, I've actually read of how the mainstream thought or the mainstream idea of how Islam came to Indonesia was through the Arab traders around after, because how Indonesia of its belief system before Islam, before all this, was based on animism, where the belief of there being living souls or entities in trees and forests and whatnot, as how Indonesia is full of jungles, it's full of forestry and whatnot. So after that animism, I'll break it down with a little bit of a brief history of Indonesia.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So with the contact of Indian and Chinese traders coming back and forth to Indonesia, in a sense, the Indonesian local rulers, they absorbed many of the teachings, or they got really influenced with what they believed in. So they flourished upon Indonesia, or what was before Indonesia, many Hindu kingdoms, many Buddhist kingdoms, in a sense. So before Islam itself, they were all into the more Hindu, the many gods kind of concept, and Buddhism with reflecting with the self and whatnot. And so with that as well, the influx, and due to the influx was because of Indonesia being dubbed as the Spice Islands, in the sense where if you go to for example, a coffee shop, for example, I'm not stating any coffee shop, but if you go and you go for any coffee, you'd see on one of the coffee options, you'd have Java coffee, Javanese. And people wouldn't think twice, oh, what is this word? Is this Japanese? Are they misspelling it for Japan, or in a sense, But it's actually, Java itself is an island, one of the main islands in Indonesia, where the capital of Indonesia is Jakarta is. So from that is how you see that without actually referring that to Indonesia, in a sense, where it is penetrated without the the brand of Indonesia. Oh, this is Indonesian coffee in a sense. So there's some.
I didn't know
words
Indonesia
here.
had coffee.
And there's even an icon on our computer software.
Java.
Yeah.
I don't know how far that goes with the naming, but in one way or another. But yeah, and in that sense, how as I continue with the influence of the Indian traders, the Chinese traders, they also came the influence of foreign powers that wanted to see if they could add a little spice to their food, per se. The Dutch, where they came and colonized Indonesia for about 3.5 centuries, in a sense, where also it came through with the Portuguese, where we have some words. And in the Indonesian language itself, there are many words that are taken from different languages, from different cultures as well. From the Portuguese, from the British as well.
Japan also, I think.
Japan also. And that was just only that couple, if it's not a year or couple years, couple moments of them establishing themselves within the Asia territory during World War II in that sense. And going back to how Islam came, the Arab traders, they came as well, seeking to, to benefit and give benefit as well. They weren't just Arab traders, they were Muslim traders, and on top of that, they were the Yemeni traders in a sense. And so when you see Islam as how it's practiced in Indonesia, in a sense, you see, if you ever study the different school of thoughts in Indonesia per se, that predominant school of thought in Indonesia of that hue of Islam would be of the school of Imam Shafi'i, in a sense. So for example, during prayer, when you pray like your Fajr prayer or your Maghrib prayer or your Isha prayer, in a sense, with them saying the Al-Fatiha, the opening surah, they also say the Basmala, or they say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim out loud, and the Al-Fatiha, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin, all the way to Waladdaleen, and then after that they have the Ameen out loud. So probably that would be of contrast compared to other Muslim societies as to the subterranean.
So you're saying that the Islam of the Indonesians is very similar, or if not identical, to the Islam of the Yemenis?
That's how it is. That's how it is. So I actually noticed that myself as me being a student at, in Egypt, per se, seeing how the Indonesians, where they refer to in many of their studies or many of their shuyukh per se, like the teachers who they follow, are many of the Yemeni lineage in a sense, where they really see how their Islam, of how Islam was practiced in Indonesia, was really connecting to how Yemen, or how Islam itself is really practiced in Yemen, and as how Islam was spread through eastwards from Yemen onwards, even past East Africa, in a sense, where they practice, if I'm not mistaken, the Shafi'i school of thought, as well as a small part of India and that whole vastness of Southeast Asia.
I never thought of it like that.
And it's also known that the Yemeni people are kind people and their mannerism is easygoing. And I have read this, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, Brother Ahmed, and Indonesian people are like this too. They are mostly kind, they're mostly like easygoing.
SubhanAllah. I mean, that stereotype, whether you make it a stereotype or not, I mean, people always comment on the way, oh, every time they go to an Indonesian community or meet Indonesian brothers or sisters, they really see that kindness, that gentleness in themselves. I mean, not to give brags or anything, but that's what I always hear of the brothers and sisters commenting about how Indonesian brothers or sisters are, or in a more general state of the Southeast Asian brothers and sisters, where there's also Islam, not just in Indonesia, but in Malaysia and Singapore, even in Thailand, Cambodia, and whatnot. So Islam is spread in Southeast Asia. It's just like a hidden gem where you really have to dig through.
Brother Ahmed, you were just talking about Indonesians and your question about the people interacting here in Cairo, Egypt with Indonesian Muslims. Can you give us a sense of the percentage of Indonesian students at Al-Azhar that have come from various parts of the Muslim Ummah? Is it a significant minority? Is it in terms of numbers of Indonesians who are here in Cairo studying at Al-Azhar?
As in the number of them, there are about some 2,000, some 3,000 students, and they're not even the most populous of students in Egypt themselves. It's the Malaysians, over around 5,000 or 4,000, if not mistaken. So the Indonesians that come over here, they really, have this motivation, this anticipation of really trying to get that bare knowledge of Islam, in a sense, where they just go and travel from Indonesia, where they themselves have their own scholars. They themselves have their own tradition of Islam, how it was spread, of the studies and the books of themselves and whatnot. But they come here and far just for studying that religion of Islam.
And also they come here just to connect with the heritage as well, because Egypt and Azhar is known to be Shafi'i. So maybe that's probably one of the reasons why they fond to come here.
SubhanAllah. And there's this really interesting thing where you actually go, if you happen to go to Al-Azhar University, to the masjid itself, and the masjid is an open air masjid per se. It has a courtyard in the middle where there used to be, if not I'm mistaken, like a wudu area or whatnot, and then it's split between these different rooms, these different corridors in a sense. And one of the corridors is called Ruwaq al-Jawi. In other words, the the room of the Javanese, or the Jawi is what they called in Arabic, the Javanese. In other words, the whole Southeast Asia population coming back, and that's a couple centuries or so, if not mistaken, back, where they have history with Al-Azhar in studying. And that, so SubhanAllah.
So the whole compartment, the whole segment under the name of
Ruwaq al-Jawi, yes.
Wow.
SubhanAllah. So,
heritage.
Back home, is it easy and common to find graduates of Azhar serving as religious leaders?
Alhamdulillah. We have Azhari graduates that are also in the political movements, and so as taking leadership roles and whatnot in their many islands or provinces per se. So they're really playing a role as well. So.
Omar, I want to ask you a question. Indonesia is very far away. As an Egyptian, would you agree with the fact that Indonesia is not given its due, in the fact that he mentioned when you go around the map you won't even find it, just a few dots of islands? Would you agree with that, someone being an Egyptian?
Yeah, I agree with that. And maybe it's like a fun fact about the globe and the earth and so on. You will find that some of the islands and some of the countries are out of proportion. Like Greenland is so big, it's like the same size of Africa. And you'll find some other countries, as the brother said, so small. So I think maybe, I don't want to think as a conspiracy theorist or something, but I think there is something related to this, that maybe, I don't know, the ones who are responsible for making the maps and so on, they don't care about these places and so on.
Okay, interesting. Honestly, one of the interesting points is how the Arab traders, they went to Indonesia, and you made mention of spices. And this reminds me also, like in Pakistan and in India, when Arab traders also came there, they also came for the spices and the herbs as well. Is there anything else that Indonesia is known for and exports and people come and regularly trade with?
Back, it was the Dutch came for the spices, which was the main priority. There are also palm trees, palm oil per se, as it being a tropical country of palm, where and its derivatives, where palm through palm oil, it has many. It's really versatile in cooking per se. There are also the spices, as what we said, cloves, peppers, and natural resources of tin, copper, minerals per se. And there's this, if not mistaken, gold mountain around Irian Jaya, or Papua New Guinea. If you've heard, it's to the west of Australia, to the east of Indonesia, if you guys know of where Indonesia is. But it's really controversial how the company that is running the drilling, or in a sense the extracting of the gold itself, is a U.S. company in a sense. So there are many dissenting opinions about that company, as to say, oh, if it's doing good for Indonesia, or the citizens themselves are actually getting or reaping the gains of that gold in a
This
sense.
is in eastern Indonesia.
Yes.
Is this also where there's a population, a high concentration of Christians, and they're trying to secede from the Indonesian government?
What I think you're talking about is East Timor or Timor-Leste, where there had been problems with the government as, in a sense, Indonesia wanted the whole archipelago as under the name of Indonesia in itself, but because of the Portuguese influence over there, there are many of them which are Christians in a sense, and that influence has, I mean, that place particularly, it's not like they speak Indonesian as, because Indonesia itself as a language is the unifying language of Indonesia. But
so you have local, maybe
local
dialects
languages
local
in a sense,
languages.
where ethnically, I could be, for example, a Javanese Indonesian, and then some other person would be not Javanese, like a Sundanese Indonesian, or a Batak kind of, or many others, as how it is probably in India or Pakistan in a sense, where you have different tribes, different, you know, cultures in that sense. And so from that themselves, they speak, I think they still speak Portuguese in a sense, and it's really goes with politics and like how the government really wants them in to become Indonesia, but then they're resisting.
Is the government like in its ruling secular, or it's in the between secular and religious?
It's secular in what do you mean, and what sense?
Like, I mean, like a separation between the state and religion?
Between state and religion, I would say that one of the founding principles of Indonesia, being Indonesia itself, is to have the belief of one God.
Very nice, okay.
And it goes down with others, and that's why there are, I think, 5 or 6 religions that are recognized by Indonesia. As some of them, I think, there are Islam, Protestantism, Catholicism, Buddhism, and there are others I forgot, but it really shows how, like, in a sense, some people see as how Indonesia is pluralistic in a sense, where people of different you know, backgrounds are still unified under that flag of Indonesia in a sense. With where that,
so honestly, the Muslims in Indonesia, would you say that they are united in the sense their faith or the practicing of Islam is relatively the same, and there is cohesion and unity amongst Muslims?
Alhamdulillah, Muslims over there, they have their scholars where they teach them, oh, this Islam is this, like how Islam is, and this is how culture kind of conflicts with Islam and whatnot. But from the history of Indonesia itself, with the coming of Islam, Islam itself was taught through the culture of Islam in a sense. I mean, Islam was taught through the culture of Indonesia, with its tinted hue of Islam in a sense. Where, for example, Islam, it's known to be it's recorded that there are they're called the 6 saints, or if not mistaken, so there's 6 like da'is in a sense, or I forgot the number. They were the ones that are really spreading Islam in a sense through the traditions. And one way would be is that how in Indonesia you would have shadow puppets. You have these as arts, you know, as theater. You have shadow puppets, and before the coming of Islam, the arrival of Islam, the shadow puppets would portray different events of Hindu stories, or in a sense the gods and the goddesses and whatnot. But with the arrival of Islam, it changed into stories of morality, stories of you know, akhlaq in a sense, stories of the Sahaba in a sense, as to where, for example, in Tarawih, we have people that pray the 11 rak'ah, the 11 cycle, and then we have the 23, was it? Yeah. And so with the 11, some people still do this to this day. After every 2 rak'ah, they have a chant in a sense, or a nasheed, for every Khalifa, the Khulafa Rashidin, the four. So for example, after every two, because 4 times would be 8, right? So for every rest cycle, there would be a chant about the Khalifa of Abu Bakr, Siddiq. And then it would go on for after the second cycle, you know, Umar and Uthman and Ali radiallahu anhum. In a sense. So
keeping people connected with the history.
Yeah, in that sense of connecting it together with the culture and with Islam is how it accommodates with the people.
Okay.
So is there a focus, because I hear this also, that there's a big focus in Indonesia on Quran, memorization of Quran, and having like so many, like how can we say, contests and so on. Would you like to touch upon that?
SubhanAllah. So there are many boarding schools in Indonesia, specifically towards the teaching of Islam, you know, Islamic boarding schools. And coincidentally enough, I went to one, an Islamic boarding school. So alhamdulillah, it was 4 years of blessing, bismillah, mashallah. It was a really humbling experience in a sense, where I went and experienced the boarding school life and learning Islam from Fajr prayer, from morning up to Isha, from up till the night prayer, in a sense where my schedule was catered for every hour, for every minute of, you know, programs about studying, about learning Islam, and so on and so forth. And so my boarding school itself was called a modern boarding school, in a sense where they still had their secular subjects with the Islamic studies, in a sense. We still had math, biology, you know, physics, and so on and so forth. Whereas there are other boarding schools, apart from mine, which are considered Quran boarding schools, in a sense, or tahfidh, Mahad al-Tahfidh, in a sense, or like Quranic boarding schools, where purely for Quran, from morning to night, all Quran. So they really invest in that, and they try to really bring, because I've seen a picture on Facebook where there's like a picture of like an assembly of all these huffaz in a whole stadium, and they're all like memorizers of the Quran. So subhanAllah, you know,
SubhanAllah.
They're really you know, keeping that heritage of just keeping the Quran. You know.
I would like to, I'm sorry, Brother Junaid, I just wanted to comment on something here when Brother Ahmed said the secular subjects. Would you agree that we shouldn't call the subjects like math, biology, and anything related to science to say that they are secular or something? Because they are religious. They are related to religion. Would you agree with this? So if
go ahead.
Yeah, it's maybe what you're getting at, Brother Omar, is that you know, the secular societies that we now live in, most of the governments are secular, meaning that there's a separation between the power and authority of the religious organizations, the religious institutions, and the government institutions. And so this would mean that you know, when it comes to schooling, that we see that represented. It's played out in the curriculum. I mean, if you go back 1,000 years ago, they wouldn't be saying the secular part of our curriculum, or even less than that. You don't have to go back that far in history. So yeah, perhaps that.
Perhaps my wording was wrong in a sense that I've noticed how they really split it between Islamic sciences and like the other sciences, in a sense where they play it as the other, or the non-Islamic, I don't know.
And that wasn't done in the early Islamic era. Like you used to find like somebody who interprets the Quran, and at the same time he is a cosmologist, and at the same time he's a philosopher. So all is actually related to religion. I'm sorry that I just tried to clarify this.
All right, on that note, let's go to our report, and then when we come back, we'll continue discussing Islam in Indonesia. Dear viewers, let's go and watch this report together. We're going to go to Australia and see what is going on with Muslims and Ramadan in Australia. SubhanAllah, Huda TV is really branching out and trying to grasp as many different countries as we can and see how we are connected. It's very, very important for us as Muslims to understand that irrespective of our skin color, irrespective of our looks, our languages, we are all one family. We are all the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are one united nation, and we should be proud of that. They're proud of the languages, proud of the spices, as we said, proud of all the different things that we bring forward. Let's watch this report, and then when we come back, we'll continue talking about Indonesia.
And in His name we die, here and there.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ramadan Kareem from everyone here in Australia, and we just want to talk today a little bit about the traditions and practices that we find ourselves doing here in Australia during this blessed month. I'm Anthony or Ali, and I'm here with my brother Jafar.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and Ramadan Kareem to you all.
Okay, so first of all, during this little session, we just wanted to say that Australia is a country, a predominantly non-Muslim country, with only a 2% Muslim population. So there are not that many specific traditions to the month of Ramadan that you find here. Actually, on the contrary to that, I think you could say that you find a lot of blessing when you find a gathering of Muslims here, just because it's not very common. Would you agree, Jafar?
Definitely, I would agree. I remember when I was a young kid, whenever I used to be part of a gathering where they're breaking their fast together, I feel the blessings there. It's very amazing. I love the experience.
Absolutely, it was. It's been a wonderful experience for me. I'm a revert. I've only been Muslim for 2 years, and this, alhamdulillah, this is my second Ramadan that I've spent in Australia, and I'm still getting used to, the wonderful blessings of community iftars and the Taraweeh prayers and everything like that. And it's just been an immensely beautiful experience. So Jafar, you mentioned that you spent your life here, and you grew up in Australia. But sort of what practices do you find are special or specific to Ramadan in Australia?
So what I really find is the timing is very short so far. It's not unlike some other countries that have to fast 17, 18 hours. Here we fast around 12, 13 hours maximum. That's the cutoff. Also the fact that because it's not majority Muslim, it's just like you feel so happy whenever you see a brother and break your fast with him. It's an amazing feeling. We also do a lot of community iftars here. We have iftar as a community. As you know, most some people here, they don't have their family here, as Australia itself is predominantly non-Muslim.
Yeah. So like for me and Jaffa, we've spent just recently, like tonight, we spent the iftar at the university community iftar, and then there was Taraweeh prayers followed afterwards. And it was, alhamdulillah, it's been a really beautiful experience.
One thing I find here that's also amazing is the fact that it's not only one person that chips in for sponsoring the iftars. Sometimes it's just whole communities coming together saying, look, we want to have iftar as a community. We want everyone. We want to invite everyone, as much people as we can, to this iftar. And I find that really amazing and it's truly inspiring.
Right, yeah, for example, because we're a very diverse community here in Australia, so you'll get the community from one country will sort of sponsor it one night, and then the next will be from another country, and it's just, yeah.
And you get a variety of food.
That's a great thing.
And that's one sort of tradition here in Australia. And of course, anywhere is the food.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah. Although Ramadan is a a month of fasting and, you know, abstaining from what the heart desires, you know, during the daylight hours, as it is everywhere in the Muslim world. It's one of those things where we always find that because we've been sort of starving ourselves from food for the whole day and abstaining from food, when the time comes for breaking our fast, we feel like we want to have something, you know, really sort of delicious that will fill us up and things like that. So there are many sweet treats, savoury treats and things like that that we have. Isn't that right?
Of course, it is indeed. And also, one of the goals of Ramadan is, as stated in this ayah from the Holy Quran, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم.
And in His name we die, here and there.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear viewers, joining us on our live program here where we are talking about Indonesia, Islam in Indonesia, and more specific, we're going to get into the customs and the traditions of Ramadan inside of Indonesia. We want to see what kind of food they eat, what kind of clothes do they wear. We'll pick up on that in just a few moments. If I can turn to my right, Brother Ali and Brother Omar. Do you find it really interesting, really amazing how Islam spread to so many different countries? And just like our guest said, that it doesn't come to any country and change its culture or change its language. It fits right into every single culture and spreads. Do you not find that like really amazing?
That means it's a universal religion.
Yeah.
Because if it didn't apply to, like, except for one culture and that's it, it's not practical. So I think so. And then the Brother Ali was talking about, like, yesterday, I think, when we were talking about, Brother Ali, that when you close your eyes as a Christian, when you were a Christian, and you imagine a European concept of, so we don't have this concept.
Right.
Even the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, he wore different kinds of clothes. From Abyssinia, from Yemen, from, you know, he wanted to send this message that, you know, it's like, yes, I'm Arab, but it doesn't mean that other, you know, cultures are haram or something outside of the religion.
Right.
So.
And certainly not inferior. And this is the thing that about Islam that is very important. It honors, it protects culture. It doesn't seek to destroy it. People can retain their traditional language, their naming system, the way they get married, all these kinds of things. It's a very different, very dark, terrible history that the church has when it comes to destroying people's culture.
You can even see that here on the table. We've got 4 different continents, and each of them, mashallah, you know, we've got a common denominator. Very powerful. So, honest. My next question to you, let's move over to talking about Ramadan inside of Indonesia. Talk about food and customs, traditions, please.
Alhamdulillah. I mean, alhamdulillah for Indonesia, we have our spices, and we spice it up as how, here's a CNN report of how rendang, one of its like this curry beef in a sense, was named one of the best foods in the world, as in ranked #1 in a sense, and how with its environment, with its natural resources of having, you know, that palm, that coconut in a sense, that tropical kind of feeling with the fruits and the veggies and whatnot. They have lots of like coconut hints in different, like, for example, you have chicken in a sense cooked with coconut with a curry in a sense.
Coconut flavored chicken.
In a sense, yeah. You gotta try it, man. You gotta try it.
Words are not good enough. So tell me, honest, on a typical day in Ramadan, okay? I want to know about your suhoor. So in the morning, prior to Fajr, what do Indonesians normally eat? And also when they open the fast, what's a traditional Indonesian dish?
So let's start off with suhoor. So let me imagine myself being in Indonesia. I would see right before, I would say Fajr would be about 2, 3 in a sense. An hour before that, there'd be lots of young kids, lots of like designated people with their drums and whatnot, and calling out
The
seen
thing
this.
that makes a noise.
It's that drum guy again, isn't
The
it?
drum guy, the drum guy. So that spread as well, rather other than Islam, but that as well.
Yeah.
So they come out with their drums and they call out Saur, Saur, and other words Saur with their accent, Suhoor, Suhoor. You know, it's have your breakfast meal. You know, have that pre-dawn meal for. And so what they'd eat, per se, is that an Indonesian diet would consist of a main dish of just rice with other side dishes.
Okay.
Because like I'd be thinking in a Western kind of sense where rice would be like a side dish, and then it would be like the meats that would be as a main dish. It would be a main dish of rice,
Okay.
like a plate of rice, and then you have different side dishes, where a plethora of them in a sense, with that coconut with those spices and whatnot, cooked to a different degree, and you serve it together with
Chicken, meat, seafood.
all of that.
Mm.
So, and there are also designated breakfast items, food items for breakfast in a sense. There's this called bubur ayam in a sense, and bubur is porridge, ayam is chicken, so chicken porridge in a sense. For morning, it's a really hearty meal. So we would have that, and going after suhoor. And the thing about suhoor in Indonesia, where they have their timings and whatnot, like just to imagine that, like the whole Indonesia is like having its celebration of Ramadan, you know, in a sense, Ramadan Kareem, Ramadan Mubarak everywhere, where even in TV, in media, in malls and shops, it's all about Ramadan, discounts, you know, prices dropped and here and there, so on and so forth. So everything is catered towards that Ramadan vibe, whereas you'd have that in majority Muslim countries in a sense, but not as towards where more Western societies where you wouldn't see Ramadan in a sense.
So explicit.
Yeah, really.
What about dates? Do you have date trees
We
in
have
Indonesia?
no, because dates are not a tropical fruit in a sense, more a desert kind of sense where
Okay.
like Egypt, you know, and whatnot. Even in California, you have dates there. It was actually imported from I think Tunisia or Algeria back in the 1700s or 1800s in a sense. So there's like this own date genus or type called the Majol date. You gotta try it. It's like a big, sticky, sweet
It's,
date.
it's one of my favorites.
That's from California.
I don't know where it comes from.
Majol
but,
date, yeah. I've actually been there where they have these huge palm farms of just palm trees, like date trees in a sense, and they'd have these stores selling date ice cream, date cookies, date this, date that, and so they really go on their date, you know, their date hype. And so in Indonesia per se, dates, you have them imported in a sense, so not everyone gets dates, so they have their own suhoor, as what they do with the rice and the side dish in a sense. And continuing on after with that timetable of how Fajr is, or when the adhan is for that morning salah, that morning prayer, we also have a time before that, which is called imsak, or that's Arabic for like holding, or like withholding that fast. So that imsak timer is like a precaution in a sense, like a couple minutes or so before the initial adhan, to give a sort of heat, or like an alarm to say, oh, it's almost time for fasting. So do try to stop eating at
It's like
this time.
that drummer again.
Yeah, that drummer just
without the drum.
Yeah. Hold on. So they're trying to tell the drummer, the first drummer is trying to tell you to eat. Now this non-drummer is telling you not to eat. So subhanAllah, you know, they really keep it on with that imsak thing. They really try to make sure that their fast is really valid in that sense, that, oh, I won't eat at this moment, you know, after Fajr. And then going through Ramadan, the days are long in a sense. I'm not sure how many hours fasting is in Indonesia, around a moderate 18 hours, 17 hours, I would say.
Okay.
And
you said moderate. That's quite long.
yeah, in a sense. And before iftar, in a sense, many Indonesians, I mean, you would see malls being packed, restaurants and so on, like the streets getting packed just for them to get ready to break their fast.
Honest, I'm waiting to hear about the drinks.
The drinks.
Yeah,
the
what are
drinks.
the most popular drinks? Are they fruity? Are they coconuts? Are they hot or cold drinks?
We also have to consider that coconut as well. So coconut is a central part. We also have many other fruits. For example, we have lychee, if you've heard. It's like
It's like an eyeball.
Like an eyeball in a sense. You peel it, and then you gotta try it, Omar. You gotta try it, inshallah. You gotta try it. It's and it's really juicy, really sweet. It's like it's an eyeball per se. And we also have pandan. This type of we have grass jelly. You heard of grass? So it's like jelly, grass jelly in a sense, and you put that in drinks. And most of the time for iftar, in a sense, we would have like these sweet drinks. Filled with like fruits, you know, these jellies and so on and so forth. So it's really colorful when you see it. Like it's different textures as well. So it wouldn't be just like a single like iced tea in a sense. It'd be more of like coconut based with jellies and fruits and so on and so forth. So you have lots of filling with that drink. And also you also have these deep fried like appetizers in a sense, where like I had my share of pakora in a sense in the Desi culture, the Turkish culture, where it's like deep fried, you know, like batter with onions and whatnot. We have those as well in Indonesia, where it's from everything deep fried to like bananas to
deep fried bananas.
Deep fried bananas, yeah, filled with chocolate, deep fried, all the deep fried goodness and whatnot. So you gotta watch your health as well.
It looks
over there.
delicious. You
You gotta watch your health as
I
well.
want to ask a question here. You know, Indonesia is so rich, so many Muslims, so much beauty and richness coming out of this country. How can we, as Muslims from different continents, how can we connect? How can we revive the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ that we are one ummah and love one another and care for one another and understand our feelings and our troubles and try to be connected more? What do you guys think?
One of the things happening is what we're doing here in Huda TV. This is just the beginning of like spreading the knowledge itself. And if people, maybe like in Indonesia and other countries, if maybe some people they can go and spread the message through some of the videos now, it's easy on Facebook to do this as a connection like between us. Like I'm from Egypt, I'm gonna just send this message to the Muslim world in Ramadan, talking about like what's the favorite food, what's the culture and so on. And we spread it and other people will watch it. And I think English is a universal language.
Sure.
So I think mostly it's going to be understood. So that can be a beginning.
Okay.
I would say it's important to take an interest in other groups of Muslims, to learn, to take the time to learn about who they are, what the history is, the cultural, everything that you're telling us. There are, I'm sure, many different mediums that we could go to, videos, books, lectures, all kinds of things to learn, just learn. And to develop an interest, to realize that these are our brothers and sisters in Islam. How are they practicing Islam in Indonesia or Nigeria or Afghanistan? I'm observing right now, as I mentioned, that Brother Junaid, you're wearing red, the color of the Indonesian national flag, red and white.
Red and white.
Okay. And
you're observant, Ali.
He did the same thing for Nigeria. So,
representing Huda TV.
I wanted to ask you about your attire, your shirt. Is that a typical thing that we can see on Indonesian men right now?
Okay, so my typical attire, you want to be observant in a sense. It's a coat as well over it, and under it itself is a dress called baju koko, and baju is clothing. Koko is the type of clothing, and this clothing itself is particularly worn for like Muslim events, as if you want to be more of like as how you would wear a thobe, or you would wear like a jalabiya in a sense. Like so people would recognize you. Oh, this guy is like has something to do with Islam in a sense. You know, it's like a identifier in a sense. So this
the viewer probably can't see it.
You can see it.
But it's got this rich embroidery on the front.
Yeah.
And a mandarin collar.
Totally. And so this Mandarin color itself, it really gets its influence from the Chinese traders that come abroad to Indonesia, and as with the influx of immigrants coming through Indonesia, the Chinese traders, the Indonesian locals themselves, they absorb the traditions of the Chinese in a sense, and from clothing and whatnot, as how I said, from ideals, you know, the Buddhist ideals in a sense. And so this itself is a Chinese clothing where how you would see like the Shaolin monks in a sense, or people practicing Kung Fu in a sense, where it became termed to where the elderly would wear this, and the elderly in the capital Jakarta are called the Engkong in a sense. And so as I said, how baju koko Engkong is split into shortened with this shortened form of being koko koko in a sense. And so with that, and also with the influx of Muslims coming through, and they just started wearing in Jakarta this type of attire.
Are most men covering it the way you are with a Western style?
Some do.
Coat?
Some do. And some also they just leave it, and some yeah, they can cover over it. So it's really versatile in a sense, where you wear pants with it, or you wear. If I could show you, there's like this cloth where it's seamed in the middle as well. It's like
like a male skirt.
Like a male skirt in a sense. You know, Junaid, it's the lungi.
We have that in the
you wrap it over your so it covers your navel up till your legs and so on and so forth. And people use it for salah in a sense, as how you would use a thobe, as how people use like a jalabiya or that Arab dress as well. So use that as a Muslim attire, or and those specific attires are like usually seen with the elderly, in a sense that they wear that as comfort clothing.
And what about the sisters? Are they wearing like an equivalent with this kind of a design?
They have their own, like the markings here itself is a more batik in a sense, where Indonesia has its tie-dye kind of style, where like this embroidery right here, like of a floral kind of design, where that would also be with the sisters as well, where I've been hearing things in Indonesia where like the Islamic clothing culture is actually booming as well in Southeast Asia, where they're trying to promote like, oh, as well as being modest, we don't have to be, you know, we could be colorful and or be being of expression in a sense that, oh, we're still modest and we're still keeping our Islam intact.
You could model these new
being like a top designer in a sense.
Okay, guys, we have come to the end of the program. Time flies, as they say, and I'd like to thank all of you once again for coming to the studio. Brother Omar, thank you very much. Brother Ali as well, thank you very much. Brother Honest, where do we start? You spoke about the history of Indonesia, Islam there. You also spoke about the food, the culture and everything. So I'd like to thank you very much for coming and sharing with us your experience as well. Thank you very much.
Just one more point, if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
There's this point where I actually felt in Indonesia where it's that value of family, in a sense, where there's this Arabic term, silat rahm, in a sense where the tying of kinship, the tying of family, where many Indonesians would have many extended family of their nuclear family. I mean, me personally, I have like 5 uncles and aunties respectively from my dad's side and also from my mom's side. So a lot of cousins, a lot of family, and we get together, you know, we have those iftar parties in a sense where it's not just for socializing, but where we connect with each other. So, and through that, you know, you see how Islam is really spread through, you know, with the tying of kinship where they're really close to each other.
Okay.
Alhamdulillah for that, you know,
all right.
Islam.
All right, thank you very much, Brother Honest, once again for coming to the studio and sharing with us your experiences on Indonesia. Dear viewers, we have come to the end of our program here, and we had a beautiful journey through Indonesia looking at various different topics. But the one point I would like to conclude on is the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who taught us that the ummah is like a body. And if any part of that body is feeling pain, then the rest of that body also feels that pain. It's very important here at Huda TV. We are trying to unite and bring people from different cultures, different backgrounds together. Why? So we understand this hadith, that we understand that we are one body, we are one community, and we are united. We should be happy when others are happy, and we should be hurt when others are hurt. And we should try to take that time out to learn people's cultures, to learn people's traditions, and inshallah ta'ala that will bring us together. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in, and inshallah ta'ala we will see you in our next program. So until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
In the name of Allah we are born, in His name we live, and in His name we die. Here and there, our souls prostrate to their Creator with humbleness and piety, and creatures do dhikr all the time, here and there. Humans circumambulate the Kaaba while migrating birds stretch forth their wings, finding their way by Allah's mercy here and there. Our Prophet advised us to travel, seeking knowledge, while exploring Allah's miraculous creations here and there. La 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 la.